Kevan, welcome to the podcast, our inaugural session.
Thanks, brother. Good to be here.
This is my good friend, Matheson. We go back a long time in our entrepreneurial journey. Kevan now is the owner of 3 companies, Deal Night, Edge Investments, and Apollo Relations. So, Kevan, why don't you tell us a little bit about the first year of your journey as an entrepreneur?
So, oh man, that'll
Big
go
question.
back. Yeah, good question. Big question. That'll go back. We actually just looked on LinkedIn now. It was 5.5 years ago. I left my old job in institutional finance. And honestly, like that first year, I didn't actually have a clue what I was going to do. I just knew that working at a bank wasn't for me. It's funny, the irony is I spent 10 years trying to get that job. And then once I was there, a few years in, I just knew that wasn't for me. I was always going to be an entrepreneur. So when I quit, it was 2017. It was around the first time where Bitcoin was just going mental. I think it hit $20,000 for the first time, and everyone was just going crazy. At the time, just before that, I had, just out of personal passion, I've been always interested in blockchain. I was like pitching it inside of RBC, ways we could use it for internal money transfers, maybe even trading crypto on behalf of clients, things like that. So I built up a bit of subject expertise. So when I left, I wrote an ebook on that, and I ended up getting paid to travel around, speak. Like CPA had me keynote an event. I was brought onto the founding team of a company that was raising money to go public. Ultimately, we raised $4 million, and right at the time when crypto crashed and the whole company went under. And that's a whole other story we could dive into. But the first year was very little direction. Didn't really know what I was going to do. I knew what I was running away from, and that was that corporate, I'd say 9 to 5, but man, that's such a lie. It's like 7 till 7 at least, plus Sundays. So it was a year of just like exploration, meeting people, kind of sharpening my tools, and just trying to figure out what I wanted to do by finding out all the things I didn't want to do, basically.
Yeah, I love that. And I just think of you in institutional finance and then crypto and Bitcoin booming, and you almost bringing that into where you worked as your job and then ultimately branching off on your own. I think there's such a dichotomy between conservative finance by the book and then crypto, this new thing at the time that's just blowing up. What was that even like, trying to talk to that about people at RBC?
Painful. I mean, let's be honest, like a giant bank, an institution like that's where innovative ideas go to die. And if you're somebody who wants to come up with those ideas, you want to experiment, you want to try things, you're okay with failing, big bank life is not for you. I'd say my immediate team, so it was like a half a $500 billion fund. My specific business was the institutional money management. So like for pension funds and things like that, like TELUS was like a client. And that team, I'll give them credit. Like they were very forward thinking. Like, people were like a little bit younger. Like it was a good team, but ultimately you're working in a giant machine where you're just like one little cog. You're not going to change anything like that overnight. So it was almost like a waste of time. But for me, my learning, it was good. And it definitely helped brand me as an innovative thinker. I ended up getting pulled onto a team later to compete in this like nationwide contest. What was it? How can we be a better asset manager using artificial intelligence? So my idea, ultimately pitched it, got put on a team, went through a few rounds of judges, got flown out to Toronto, and my team ultimately won the competition. And that was pitching AI like 6 years ago.
Wow.
So wish I
What a
had,
timely subject. It aged better than crypto has.
Wow, way better. So, I mean, yeah, it's hard to pitch those things, but I mean, I'm sure you felt the same thing. You were coming from traditional finance as well as an accountant, right?
Yeah, I mean, we have similarities in our backgrounds. I was in CPA, KPMG, very traditional. Even on the spectrum of corporate, I don't think there's anything more conservative than audit of publicly traded companies.
Yeah, that's true.
We were there to look in all the little cracks and find anything that could have gone wrong, and everything was retrospective, past looking. I did no forward looking work.
Just throw a little blockchain in those statements.
I don't think they'd be open to it.
I don't think so either.
And I mean, it's interesting because I felt the same way, just trapped and no room for creativity. And I even saw the people that were senior managers, even some partners. And while the income gets pretty good as a partner at KPMG, their lifestyle still seemed a bit boring, to be honest. And
totally.
So it's interesting. Now let's go back to the book, because I remember where you were writing a lot of that book, which, if my memory serves me, was on a plane flying through Southeast Asia back in 2018.
I hammered out a big chunk of that book on the flight from Vancouver to Hong Kong, 14 hours direct. God, that flight sucks. There's no way to do that flight and have it not suck. But I wrote a ton of the book then. And then with you in Thailand, or what was it? We did what? Thailand? Philippines?
Yeah.
And hammering out a ton of that book on that trip, actually. Had the newsletter going. I remember we'd have our digital nomad a couple months there. Oh, that was living.
Those were the days. And it was wild because at that time we were riding that high of our first little bits of success as entrepreneurs, where we were earning enough money to support ourselves and had the freedom to travel. And I think we were in that like initial just
honeymoon
phase with entrepreneurship. I think especially for you, given the rise of crypto at that time and the fact you were there, the rising ship, a rising tide raises all boats, and you were in that, which was exciting. And those were
until it wasn't.
Yeah. So maybe walk us through what happened as crypto began tanking shortly after that, and how you dealt with that coming off that initial high, the initial success, and how you kind of rebuilt and redefined your business.
Man, well, that was like super humbling because like I had the corporate job background. I had some subject expertise in a book to give me credibility on this. So I stood out in the sense that most crypto people at the time were these like either super nerds that couldn't for the life of them explain what they're trying to pitch in a way that any normal person could understand. So for me, being good at explaining things, but having this kind of suit and tie background, very like reasonable, not like this kind of anti-government, anti-currency anarchist. People took me very seriously. So it gave me this immediate like boost. So like I said, I got those speaking gigs at like very reputable things I haven't even been offered since then. So I had that immediate success. Lots of recognition for my book, my newsletter and everything. Socials all grew because of that. Was offered this like, basically I was like the, corporate development guy. I was the suit and tie guy of this Bitcoin mining company that was ultimately going to go public. So that was my role. So I had all this kind of initial, making really good money, had the freedom to do what I want, like really flexible. And then honestly, it just like, I lived as if it was going to stay like that forever. My credit card bill, I was maxing out like at least 10 grand every single month. Like I got my skydive license, bought all the gear, I got a brand new motorcycle, got my car, traveled like everywhere, more bottle service than I even want to like think about. And I just lived like a maniac. And then one day it was all gone. Didn't receive my paycheck. Ended up finding out that the company was not going under, but making drastic cuts. Basically, almost everybody but me got like fired. Had to take a wage hit. I didn't plan for taxes. So when tax time came around, I'm like, oh, right. You're supposed to save money for taxes. I'm just used to my like employer doing that. So like it all came crashing down like pretty savagely hard. And now I was not only broke, but I was like negative. I was running up my line of credit. So I had less than where I started. And after a year being an entrepreneur, living the dream, that's like a pretty brutal like slap in the face, like just cold bucket of water on your head. And it was a long journey of rebuilding, honestly. Like I put myself in a pretty bad spot.
That's a fascinating story, especially given you were in Bitcoin mining, which is so dependent on the price of Bitcoin. So when the price drops below the cost to produce it, it's almost a worthless business model at that point.
It's totally worthless.
And it's amazing that you went through that, you got your kind of slap in the face from reality. And our journey was a little bit inverse in that sense. And in my first year as an entrepreneur, I think I made $10,000 that first full year.
Yeah.
And the week before I left KPMG, I went to the bank and got a line of credit for $13,000. So that was my runway.
I love that.
Which I would have never even gotten that much if I hadn't still had the job at KPMG.
Yeah. I did the exact same thing, by the way.
There we go. That's
just before
that's
quit,
in the playbook.
I got the biggest line of credit.
That's in the playbook. But for me, it was a hard first couple of years, and it very gradually started to improve. But I think because you were able to ride this notoriety you had from the book and the crypto boom, you had a bit of a boom on your first year, but then it crashed after, which in a lot of ways would be harder because you had established this new normal. And then you drop below it. So where did you transition to after the crypto market was dead and you could no longer be just the crypto guy and that wouldn't pay the bills?
Yeah, like I'm trying to even remember. It's like I like blacked out so much of it, but it's like I basically realized like, okay, my core skill was not that I was some blockchain wizard. Like not at all. There's way smarter people in that. My skill was that I was good at explaining it. I can learn things quickly. I can explain them well. I'm fairly, well spoken on video, on stage and stuff. Like I'm comfortable with that. So I realized, okay, my core skill isn't crypto. It's basically like teaching essentially. So I thought, okay, well, why don't I do this for other industries. So I think my very first client was Jordan Trimble. Shout out to you, Jordan. Sky Harbor Resources, still an investor in that company today for all kinds of reasons. But he basically was the very first person to write me a check to do kind of the same thing what I was doing for crypto, where like Crypto Minute was this like short form video, really simple to explain crypto. But then I did it for uranium. You know, why is nuclear energy important? Why is uranium important? Why is Sky Harbor Resources well positioned? And I mean, you know, it doesn't sound innovative at all right now, but six years ago, making short form content when Reels weren't a thing, YouTube Shorts weren't a thing, TikTok wasn't around. I was so early with my prediction towards short form content that it didn't rank that well. Like on YouTube, it was a complete flop. Like we ignored YouTube because they hated short form content. I'm pissed because I deleted all that original stuff, and I would have been so good for TikTok and YouTube, but. Basically the pivot was just to realize what my core skills were and what they weren't, and use that to kind of diversify. So now I'm sector agnostic. Like I'll learn about any sector, I'll teach about any sector, as long as it interests me. And realizing like that's what the core skill was, and then kind of rebuilding from there really.
Yeah. So for the record, Kevan was an early predictor of short form content, too early. The market wasn't ready for you at that time.
Man, you could be right and early, and the net effect will be that you're wrong.
Well, that's an investment concept, right? I mean, we're talking about 100%. Colloquial short form content, but that's also an investment concept that I'm sure you're familiar with.
Yeah, 100%.
So let's go back to Sky Harbor, uranium. You're making content for them. What's the purpose of your content? Is it to generate demand, to gain more investment for this company? Like, what's the end goal of that content? Yeah,
I mean, ultimately, so like, okay, we're talking about Edge Investments at this point. This was the first company I founded. Ultimately, the companies that are publicly traded, they want somebody to see the video and be like, oh, this is interesting. Do their research, be like, I like this company, it fits within my criteria, I'll go buy the stock. That's why companies pay for investor relations. No matter what anybody tells you, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Now, legally, I can't say, hey, I'm going to get you trading volume, I'm going to make your stock go up, because at the end of the day, investor relations' job is to tee you up, give you good, pretty materials, write you nice articles and stuff that are all factual. Like, I don't like the pumpy, fictitious stuff, or like there's a lot of fraud out there, like don't get me wrong, but my job is to tee you up, make you look good, and then it's up to you once you got attention, like you got to deliver on your business and knock it out of the park. If you don't have any news or don't have a good company at the end of the day, then it's not going to work, right? It shouldn't work. So ultimately, yeah, it's a marketing firm, but now we're kind of shifting where we're doing like, it's a much bigger team now. It's quite a big team, and we have a lot more assets. Like the website has actually become like a huge part of the business, and same with the email newsletter, things that sound old, but they're still super relevant. We do a lot of free stuff now. Like we do a ton of research for legit companies that we like, that we follow, that we invest in, tons of educational stuff. And then just like any other media site, we plug in sponsored content, and that's how you get paid ultimately.
It reminds me of one of the ways, the frameworks I look at digital marketing through as well. It's really just effective communication at scale. You're effectively communicating your clients' businesses to a broad audience, and that gets eyeballs on it, but it's up to the business to have something good for those eyeballs to look at. Totally. You're just like the in-between person in a way.
And I mean, that's got to be pretty similar for you. Like when you run an ad campaign for like a dental office, well, you can get traffic to the office, maybe get somebody in the door, but if they break somebody's tooth on the first visit, they're probably not going to be successful. And that has nothing to do with you. You did your job, but they didn't deliver on their end. So I mean, that's marketing, isn't it? Right? You can. What is it they say? You can put a lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig.
I know a different version. I think you can bring a horse to water, but you can't force it to drink.
There you go. I like mine.
Yeah, there you go. Well, no, that's exactly it. It's just communicating at scale, and it's leveraging the algorithms of Meta and Google on Facebook, Instagram, Google search, and it's like become its own entity. Really all it is you're communicating to people at scale, but you plug that into the algorithms and all the information those platforms have about people and the public, and you can sometimes get these crazy exponential results.
So for you, like when you started running ads for clients, like I think back, 5-6 years ago, running like Facebook ads or Instagram ads, like that was pretty like, I don't know if I want to say new, but like I feel like it was back then. I feel like it was pretty wild and interesting back then. There's still people kind of figuring it out, like, oh, do I run ads on Instagram? Do I run ads on Facebook? Is it worth it? Did you teach yourself that, or how did you learn how to do that?
Yeah, well, from my story, and most people watching this will know what I do, but for North Digital, my agency, we're primarily a media buying agency. So what we do is we run ads and we convert that traffic into leads.
Right.
So in digital marketing, there's a million different things you can do. There's website development, SEO, general branding, and we're very niche focused on running ads and then converting that traffic into whatever the end goal is, whether it's sales or leads. So for me, coming from accounting, in terms of digital marketing, I was fully self-taught.
Cool.
I leveraged some of the business skills I'd learned in the CPA and my master's and undergrad in business. It did help a little bit. I still work with spreadsheets quite a bit because we're tracking metrics and whatnot and managing people. But digital marketing, especially then, was less formalized. Like you had the people that did a business degree and had a very broad understanding of marketing. And then you had the people that learned through YouTube or self-taught how to actually really take advantage of these platforms, which are extraordinarily powerful.
Yeah.
The Google Ads Manager, the Facebook Ads Manager being the big ones then. Now YouTube ads, TikTok ads those are kind of the big four for digital marketing. So it was largely self-taught.
Yeah, that's incredible. I'm trying to remember. So what was North Digital your very first business venture, or did you ever have anything like even back, like way back, like little goofy high school hustler kid kind of stuff?
Oh, I did have some goofy high school hustles.
Okay,
I actually tutored math and physics when I was 1 year out of high school for grade 11 and 12 students. And similar to you, actually, I would say I had a pretty good understanding of the subject matter, but I was good at explaining it in a way that people could understand.
Yeah. And
that's why my tutoring business did well relative to it being a small tutoring business. Yeah. So that was actually the first entrepreneurial dollars I made.
I want to tell you mine because my parents still...
I want to hear it.
There's no holiday that goes by without my parents reminding me of this. So we lived in Indonesia for when I was in grade 6. And my dad would always pack me these... like, I don't know, like a tuna sandwich or something that I was like, thought was so boring.
Yeah.
And all the other kids, the Indonesian kids, would have like these triple stackers with rice and like dumplings and veggies. And I was like, oh, that looks like way better. And I'd like eat my tuna sandwich and all these kids are like, wow, like, what is that? Like, what are you eating? I'm like, it's like a sandwich. It's like a, I don't know, North American thing, I guess. Like, or it's probably not, but you know what I mean? It wasn't an Indonesian thing, clearly. And then someone's like, well, hey, can I have some of it? And I'm like, no, sorry, it's like my whole lunch. I can't. And then like, well, can I buy it from you? I'm like, what?
Damn, dude.
Interesting. And I looked and you can get these dumplings called siomai. They were like these awesome little dumplings with this peanut sauce. And it just looked way better than my tuna sandwich for 5,000 rupiah. I don't even know. I think it's like maybe a couple bucks or something like that. And I was like, okay, well, I'll sell it to you. Will you pay me 10,000 rupiah? And they're like, yeah, done. No problem. So I give them my sandwich. I'd take 10,000 rupiah. I'd spend 5,000 on siomai, eat my delicious lunch, and then pocket the other 5,000.
Okay.
And what ended up happening is I had so many students asking me for these sandwiches that I started asking my dad for like more and more sandwiches. And then he's just like, kid, like, what is going on? Like, why do you need all these sandwiches? And then I just told him. And I was like, he's going to get mad. But he just like absolutely loved it. He thought it was hilarious because he's an entrepreneur. He's definitely the one who gave me that entrepreneurial bug. But he loved it and references it all the time. So that was my official first dollar in the pocket from an entrepreneurial venture.
Man, that's amazing. Which city in Indonesia did you live in? I think I even knew that about you.
It's called Lipo Karawaci. It was like just outside of Jakarta.
Just outside Jakarta.
Like in cleared, empty traffic, maybe like an hour drive, but in like Indonesian traffic, like hours.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So I love that story. It's funny because a tuna sandwich is like a fairly basic, not that desirable dish in North America. But just because it was new in that market, you were able to earn some money that way.
Totally. I mean, you look at like international trade like that, things that are like, you know, a mangosteen, the sweet little fruit in Thailand, not a big deal, but you get it here, it sells for a fortune and people are like blowing their minds out of like how interesting this thing is. So people are just finding those kind of arbitrages all out, like coconut water. Like coconut water is essentially gone like viral, if you will. It's everywhere. We don't have coconuts here, but it's just little things like that. People, you travel abroad, get these experiences, find something unique and interesting that's local to somewhere else, bring it back, blow people's minds. Doesn't always work, obviously, but yeah, I mean, little arbitrages like that exist everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially the world is so global now. Everyone wants, I forget the name of it, but a certain type of consumerism where you want to try like everything. Like variety is king, where you want all the different tastes.
North America.
North America could be that too.
Just want everything.
So going back to that first dollar, do you feel like that put the seed in your mind of wanting
huge.
to? Okay.
I was like, I can make money off stuff like this. Massive. Like when I got back to school, I was in high school when I got back to North America, I became a recess quote for those older people in the audience. Maybe you Gen Zs don't know, but there's this guy in the show called Hustler Kid, and he'd have this big trench coat. Yeah. He'd open it up, and whatever you needed, like Hustler Kid had it. And I essentially became that guy in my high school. Like anything you needed, like I'd have Cuban cigars, I'd have sunglasses, fireworks, like you name it. Like I would always just find little things to sell, and like anywhere I can make a buck. Like I would pick up fireworks from the US and I'd put them in my trunk, and I'd park behind the school, open it up. I'd have a line of like 40 kids lined behind my trunk, and I was like selling fireworks, and I'd like sell out in like a day, and just like always just greedy little entrepreneur from day one. That's a terrible way to market myself. But you know what I mean? I was definitely very capitalistic. I was looking for the money. I wasn't doing it for the passion, but I just love finding a need and filling it when other people are too lazy to do so. So
yeah, I mean, I feel like there was also passion there though. Even by the way you describe it.
Passion for building something, finding a niche, figuring out logistics on like, where do I buy it? Maybe there's tax implications, like, et cetera, marketing, got to let people know. Like there's always certainly the excitement and passion of building something, but at the end of the day, let's be real. It's the money that, that sparked my interest for sure.
Yeah. And what would you I'm curious, what would you spend money on then? Let's say you earned a couple $100s or maybe a couple $1,000s through fireworks sales. Like what was the payoff? Was it new clothes, experiences?
I was a good saver back then.
It's a good combination, a hustler and a saver.
Not anymore. Now just a hustler. I'm a terrible saver. I spend 110% of what I make.
Crypto boom ruined you, huh?
It ruined me. I just never adjusted from the lifestyle. But what would I spend it on? Yeah, clothes, like Nike Dunks. Like I'd buy a lot of signature shoes that I still have today, but not much. I mean, I was a pretty good saver. Traveling, I spent so much. I've spent so much money traveling in my days. Like I don't even want to do the math. But even when the moment I left high school, booked a flight to South America immediately. I traveled all over South America, Central America, Europe that year, Southeast Asia not too long after that. So I spent so much money on traveling, but don't regret it for a second. The best education is travel for sure, in my opinion.
Well, I can relate to that because I went to University of Victoria, and the business school there has the exchange program where it's, I think 75-ish% of students actually go on exchange. So I went to Prague in the Czech Republic for 4 months.
Unreal.
And that sparked, I think it sparked my travel desire, but it also sparked just the desire to do something different than the everyday 9 to 5, 7 to 7, that there was more to life to explore.
I love that.
So that can be a huge portal to walk through. So going back to you had this taste of entrepreneurship, and then a number of years later, you left the finance position to be official. During that time, were you kind of itching for your opportunity? Was that itch always there? Or big time? Okay.
Big time. I mean, honestly, like at the firm, it was pretty obvious that I didn't belong there. Like, I definitely was not the smartest. Like, there's no chance that I was the smartest. Like, these guys were like brain level 100. Like, it was out of control. I basically charmed my way in. Like, I was certainly smart, but these guys were like on another level. But, I think the truth is, and I'll say this now, is like from people that I hire, you're not always looking for the smartest person, because sometimes smart people can be arrogant dicks and that don't work well with other people, and that are rigid and think they know everything and lack the soft skills. So I would way rather hire for character, personality, like desire to learn, and intelligence. You can't be an idiot and get a good quality job, but there's so many things that are more important. So I managed to get my way in there, by being smart, but by having the right attitude and being right place, right time. But it became pretty apparent that this wasn't where I was going to be, because I'm a chatterbox. Like, I'm an innovative thinker. Like, I wasn't the exact mold of what they wanted in capital markets, or that aspect of capital markets, like in the big portfolio management. It's very, very structured, very stringent, not much creativity or flexibility. And it just became more and more obvious. And I was literally, I just had this like spark of a memory. I almost opened a barber shop.
Wow. I could so see you doing that. I feel like it'll still happen one day. Maybe a retirement business.
It might. I'm honestly, it might happen. But I wrote a business plan for a barbershop. I downloaded from BDC. They had a business plan template. I wrote it all out. I was going to pour my money into this thing. I was so excited about it. and ultimately didn't do it. And I'm glad I didn't do it. But one thing that I talk to people about is that coming up with like a business idea, a lot of people are like, it'll come to me, like it'll happen. And like, sure, sometimes it will. And for those of you that have some divine intervention and an idea drops on your head, good for you, because that's the luckiest thing in the world, because it doesn't really work like that. I think coming up with a good business idea, that's a full-time job in itself. Like you need to be sitting there every single day, looking at little niche opportunities, looking at competition, what businesses are getting funded, what businesses are not getting funded, what industries are growing, what is not. And you need to be coming up with 200 absolute garbage ideas before you get your one good idea. So it's so hard to have a demanding job and to figure out what you're going to do next. So unless you have some like really easy job where you can like off the side of your desk figure something out, which I didn't have. So ultimately that's why when I quit, I didn't really know what I was going to do. I just knew that I wasn't going to figure it out while I was working these kind of hours. So I had to quit and kind of just take that leap and just be terrified and needing money that it just speeds everything up. And you like, it's life or death. Like you either figure it out or you're going right back to your job.
Yeah.
And wouldn't be back to that same job. I probably wouldn't have been welcome back after quitting like that. So it's tough, man.
Yeah. So, I mean, so you really burned your boats.
Well, I wouldn't say that.
Well,
I didn't leave on negative terms.
No, I mean, by burn my boats, I just mean like you force yourself to make it work.
Oh, yeah.
Not burn.
I see what you mean.
Not to
Like,
confuse
no
with burning the bridges.
Yeah, okay,
there's no going back. Well, in that I mean, yeah, I think that quote comes from, it's like a famous invasion where the people landed on the beach and then the commander burned all their boats. So it said, you guys can't retreat. You have to make it work.
Wow.
And
ruthless.
I feel like for you, when you left your job, you didn't have the idea fully crystallized, but you had to figure it out because your line of credit was ticking.
Yeah.
Going back would have been a defeat in your eyes, I imagine.
Yeah. And I still, every once in a while, like have thoughts of like, what if I had stayed?
Yeah.
But those thoughts never last more than like 3 seconds. And I'm like, there's no way. No chance. I knew I was going to be an entrepreneur. I was going to do something different. Going back, admitting defeat was never an option.
Yeah. So you touched on something really interesting as well, is this idea of how to figure out your idea, your passion, your business. And I think a lot of people get stuck on that, where they know they want to be an entrepreneur, they know they want to do something for themselves, but they don't know what to do. And that's the part they get stuck on. What would you say to someone who knows they want to be an entrepreneur, but doesn't, like, I don't know what I'm passionate about. I don't know what business I want to start. Like, what do you do? You mentioned brainstorming ideas, but how, not an easy question, but what would you say to that person?
No, but actually I do have an answer for that. So here's what I did. And I don't know where, so apparently this is like an actual framework, but I just kind of thought of this on my own, but somebody's told me it's like a real business framework. Think of like a Venn diagram. It's like, okay, one circle is like, what are you uniquely really good at? Then another circle, there's going to be 3 circles. So the other circle is, what is the world willing to pay you for? And then the third circle is, what do you really enjoy doing? Okay, so it's passion. What do you like doing? What's the world willing to pay you for? And what are you uniquely good at?
Yep.
Find something that intersects all 3. There should be tons of things, but then that's your business right there, right? It's something you love to do. You're going to be good and have a competitive advantage, and you're actually going to make money doing it. So that's obviously a simple answer. It's way harder in practice, actually, like figuring that out. But that's a good framework.
I've seen the framework. I think it's a Japanese framework, and I think there's a Japanese name for it. I will look it up after.
I think it's a Kev Math framework.
Okay.
No, I can't take credit for that.
We'll put it in the description wherever this is posted.
Yeah, I love that.
But no, finding that intersection makes sense, because I find there's different sides of the spectrum, where there's people that are all about follow your passion no matter what. Then there's other people that say, no, don't follow your passion. Do something you're good at that you can make money at. And I think what you're saying, I agree with, is that it's really the combination of both of those. You have to have some level of passion. You have to have some level of ability. And it has to be something the market values, or else you're not going to make any money at it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, some people aren't motivated by money, so some people would probably just drop that out of the circle. But man, at the end of the day...
But you have to make enough to survive.
Yeah. Everybody's motivated by money, because if you have to eat... there's motivation for you right there. So I guess everybody's motivated by money, whether they think they are or they're not.
Yeah. And again, I've heard both sides of the fence on that, where people say, oh, if you truly are passionate about it, then you shouldn't care at all about the money. But I think the flip side is that if you're truly passionate about it, then you need to make money to do it full time, or else you have to do something else that you don't like.
I happen to be passionate about money too, if we're being honest.
There you go. I mean, well, let's fast forward a little bit now to 3 companies that you're running right now, or some of them fully you're fully running. Some of them you have other people and partners in place, but we have Deal Night, we have Apollo Relations, and Edge Investments. So Edge Investments, I understand, was your first company, and now that's branched into 3. So tell us a little bit about how that split happened, and then what each 3 of those represent and what their mission is.
So, okay, it started with Edge, with that story I told you about, making the video, realizing, okay, there's a business I can make about creating short form social media content for publicly traded companies. So that's where it started. And what ended up happening is we got a lot of traction on the content. We got a lot of notoriety. Like, people were reaching out like crazy, and we scaled. And then people started saying, hey, can you do more like traditional investor relations stuff? If I put your phone number and name at the bottom of a press release, are you cool answering calls with investors? Can you help us write press releases? You're a good writer. And then I started, and if somebody like calls, can you answer? If they email you, can you answer? So I started taking on these more traditional like investor relations functions, and the business started morphing. And then we started getting more and more clients of that business unit started growing even faster. And then it got to the point where 2 things happened. One, the business model was like too complicated. It was like two companies smushed into one. So it's kind of like hard to explain like who we are and what we do. And I think having that focus is important to have everyone on the same, wavelength. But then on the other hand, some of my partners who are still my partners now that run Apollo, they wanted equity, and rightfully so. They had earned it. Like, we'd worked our asses off through some like pretty epic bull markets. So they wanted that. But I was really, really attached to Edge Investments, as my face is all over it, right? So I was really hesitant to give that up. So what I thought is, okay, the part of the business that they really, really helped pioneer and scale was that traditional like investor relations business. So I said, okay, what if I carve that out, put it in a separate company, give it a new name, new brand, which is Apollo Shareholder Relations. Then they would become equity partners of that. They would have, chief roles, and that would be the split. I'd still own all of Edge, then we'd be 50-50 on this new business, Apollo. So that's how we run it today. So my business partners, Jazz and Chase are still my partners in Apollo. They basically run the business. Like, those guys take care of like everything. And, I'm now mostly responsible for sales, some company management, some strategy. I get pulled into account management a lot. But they effectively run the company and have been growing the company. And a lot of the stuff we do now, I didn't even create, they created. And we've got a team that works with us as well that they help supervise. So that's Apollo. Then Edge, I realized this point where we had really good content. Everybody kept complimenting the content, saying it was great, but we weren't growing. Like, the socials flatlined. The website was a joke. It was like a placeholder. Same with the email newsletter. And I realized, okay, I'm missing some skill set here. And I tried to figure it out myself, and I couldn't. SEO and digital marketing, all that's much more complicated than people think. So what ended up happening is, there's these 2 guys, Ben and Peter. They're my current partners at Edge Investments. They own half the company there. So one of the partners, Peter, I know, he was a friend of mine. We were introduced probably a year before. His business partner at the time, Ben, who's an expert at SEO, website structuring, etc., said, hey, I found this article. It's amazing. We really want to get into the space of like, small cap stocks, finance, capital markets. It's a really profitable niche. We really want to get into this. Here's an example of a website that's got amazing content, but this guy clearly knows nothing about website structuring and SEO. And he's like, oh, that's my buddy Kev. Do you want an introduction? So he introduced us. We all hit it off like within milliseconds. Like, we had a friendship immediately, and said, okay, let's do this. So we became partners in the company. Their objective was to rebuild everything from scratch. Because basically, like, your website's shit. Your domain's shit. Everything is structured poorly. The content's good, but we got to just start from scratch. And that's like heartbreaking. But since then, it's been about a year that we've been working together. The progress we've made is insane. Site traffic is up like 500-600%. Our newsletter is getting click-throughs and open rates like way higher. We're pumping out massive amounts of SEO-focused content every month. We've got 5 articles right now related to venture capital, small cap stocks, penny stocks, things like that, like high-risk investing, that are all ranking top 3 in the entire world. Like, we're outranking like Motley Fool and some of these beasts. And it's because my content, which now I'm not the writer, I have multiple writers, good content partnered with really good just like technical knowledge, just turns out to be a deadly combo, as you'd expect. So that's grown like crazy. So those are my partners there, and there's a whole other team that comes with that as well. Then the third one is Deal Night Events, which it's totally my passion project. I think it's probably, you look at any social media at Kev Matheson, and it's probably brutally honest that's like my total love.
I would say this feels like it's your crown jewel business.
It's the crown jewel, and I hold on tight. I love it, man. Like, it started as just like, I went to so many investor events. They were just brutally boring, fluorescent lights, boring presentations. You're stuffing your face with steak, chugging coffee just so you don't fall asleep while some old man flips through a 50-page slide deck about how amazing they are. And it's just awful. So I thought, there's got to be a better way to do it. Can we take, premium high-end nightlife and high quality investor events and like Shark Tank, Dragon's Den style pitches? Can we smash those together, make something that's way more compelling, way more social, way more engaging, and something that people want to take their phone out, put it on social media. So you get this like augmented effect of, you get this like digital exposure that these events never have. Nobody's going to sit in this boring ass dungeon presentation and take out their phone and share it with their friends on social media. Not a chance. But my events, I've got influencers coming. One of the biggest business podcasts in the entire world came to my Miami event, and he was putting me in his story and all that. So like, we get this totally different audience that has this massive exponential effect. And I just love being on stage. I love it. Like, I'm an entertainer at heart. If I could do that for the rest of my life, I'd be the happiest guy in the world. So like I said, that Venn diagram, I've found my perfect mix. I'm uniquely good at it, apparently. People are definitely willing to pay me for it. And I love every second of it. So I'm just blessed to have figured something out like that. And I'm hanging on tight.
Amazing. So Deal Night is really changing that industry, and it's modernizing the investor events, pitching in so many ways. And it's interesting you brought up two different vehicles. There was like traditional investing events, and then there was Shark Tank. And I've seen your content, and you've mentioned that one of the big differences between Deal Night and Shark Tank is that in Deal Night, people in the audience can actually invest in the company. Yeah. So talk a little bit about that. It's not just an event for fun. It's an event where people have opportunities to invest in the presentations they see.
Yeah. And Deal Night's one of those things that it's like a journey of 1,000 steps. Every event we're getting better and better, and not just logistically, but like figuring out what's like the main value. So in the very first 3 Deal Night events was my whole goal was like, can I just make an investor event fun? So if anything, we actually leaned too far into the fun thing, and it became just like a big, massive party. And that's not what we were going for. So yes, we got people to come. We got it kind of, we made it really attractive to a lot of people. So it wasn't your traditional crowd of analysts and brokers and things like that. Like we made investing sexy again. Like we made it interesting, but then we really had to dial into making it more serious to make sure it was like good value for the companies presenting. And we're still figuring out what our main differentiator is. But just like you said, I love Shark Tank and Dragon's Den. I've probably watched almost every episode, but you watch it and there's 5 sharks, right? My concept is that you come to an event and there's 200 sharks. So you pitch your story. Everybody in the audience has a chance to invest, because think about watching Shark Tank. You see a company and you're just thrilled and you're like, I would love to invest in this. But not only are you seeing it, 3, 4, 5 months late because they filmed it ages ago, but 2, you're not able to invest in it. It's just not open to you. It's unless you're an accredited investor or you go through some kind of venture capital fund, which again, you have to be an accredited investor for, or maybe your friends and family and you squeeze in that way. But it's really hard to get into like the hottest deals that are private are really, really hard for a regular person to get into. And what I've learned recently is that I always said, it's the rich people that can get into these things. Even rich people get cut out of these things all the time. We have this group out of New York that have these family offices, which is like, family office is basically just like, if you're a super wealthy family, you start a fund because you have so much money, you basically make a fund out of it.
Yeah.
These guys are trying to get this private company deal flow, just like the dragons or the sharks, but they're getting cut out constantly because they're saying, oh, just go to talk to our venture capital fund. Well, these guys don't want to go talk to the venture capital fund because then they got to pay a 2% management fee and give up 20% of the profits to them too. So not saying that's a terrible thing. I'm just saying even these people don't have access to these funds. So it's about leveling the playing field for everybody. So our audience is diverse. Like we have venture capital funds, we have big institutional money managers, we have super wealthy individuals, and we have totally random, just retail traders who are just figuring out investing for the first time. So it's like a really diverse crowd. And we've experimented. We've had public companies, we've had private companies, we've had nights that are focused on just one industry like cannabis or mining. We've done nights that are diverse. So we're still iterating and figuring out where the ultimate value is. But the whole idea is to democratize access to investing in early stage companies, whether they're private or public, getting you close to management in a way that you wouldn't be able to on your own. And at the same time, having a lot of fun and making sure that the networking aspect is really powerful as well. It's a big reason people go.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I can see all the different benefits. There's investing, there's networking, there's fun, there's learning, all of these items happening at once. So For the companies that present, do you need to be an accredited investor to invest, or can people often invest small sums of money to the presenters' companies?
So fortunately, years ago, the Jobs Act in the US and something similar in Canada allowed for equity crowdfunding.
Okay.
So what this basically does is it says that, okay, these investment rounds that are typically reserved only for accredited investors, which if you don't know, roughly it means you have $1 million in the bank, or you make something like $200,000 a year or more. I think the US is similar or close enough. So that means you're an accredited investor. And that means in the government's eyes that you are now wealthy enough that you can take the risk of investing in these, let's say like a private company, for example, that you don't have a relationship with management, because that's another exemption that would allow you in. So what equity crowdfunding does is it allows you invest kind of like a Kickstarter campaign. Like it's very simple. You go to a landing page, you can see a video about the company, you can see the financing terms, and you can invest. Now they have strict rules on what you can invest, and they just recently bumped it up. I think it's something in the ballpark of, I think it's $2,000 or $2,500 you can invest.
Okay.
And you can do that twice a year, something like that. In the US, it's a little bit more relaxed. And the companies have a certain limit to how much they're allowed to take in capital. In the US, it's much bigger, but that's not important right now. So the point is they created these exemptions to allow you to do it. So as long as the company does the paperwork, which isn't too onerous, to set that up, anybody can invest in these companies. So going forward, we're looking at all kinds of new things. Like for one, we even want to have an invest live feature where people in the audience can use Apple Pay or something to invest in a crowdfunding round in real time. You're limited by the amount, but then if you're accredited, you can invest even more. So that's going to become more and more important. And hopefully over the summer, we're looking at different partners right now. And hopefully we're able to announce something with that really soon for our fall tour, hopefully.
That would be amazing. I mean, you're really building a perfect storm you're almost like engineering the viral nature of the events.
Trying.
Especially if you can get real-time investment, that would be something that I have never seen before.
Yeah.
And I mean, I imagine for the companies that come and present, it's partially about gaining some investment money funding potentially, but it's also so much about the exposure and so much about getting their name out there and getting the name out there to several hundred influential people in whatever city that you do these in.
Glad you mentioned that. So like a key differentiator between my event versus some of these other more traditional investor events is that, raising capital, getting people to buy the stock is ultimately what a company would want, right? They want to present, they want people to invest in them, believe their story. What is really unique about my event is that I'll call investor relations value. My events also have a big public relations value where the number one rule is that nobody's going to buy your stock or invest in your company if they don't know you exist. You can be the greatest company in the world, hidden, and nobody can invest in you, period, right? So you have to have a budget for making noise. So with my events, by being on stage, not only are you pitching to hundreds of people that are going to tell hundreds of people that are going to tell hundreds of people, but you're also getting everybody with their phones out, posting it online, companies, people clicking on these stories, looking back at what's Deal Night events, seeing who's presenting. Like there's this massive ripple effect. This event, we've got some large media people coming in. Like I mentioned that podcast in the US, influencers. So we have this massive ripple effect that rule number one to marketing a company, raising capital is get your name out there everywhere. Have people know your name, your ticker symbol if you're publicly traded, and have them just know who you are as like a CEO and have a good feeling about you. Sometimes it comes down to that gut feeling. So having a chance to hear a CEO be like, oh, that was a really good guy. That was a compelling pitch. I'm interested enough to take the next step and learn more. Like that's the ultimate goal, to have people get to that point, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And you can see the value for, let's say I'm the owner of a company and I'm looking to get the name out there. There's only so many ways I can do that. And there's Deal Night's a very unique way to do that. And there's not like, I don't see you even having a lot of competitors in that space.
For what I'm specifically doing, I'm not aware of any.
Which is, that's a blue ocean in that sense, right?
Yeah, and that's why we're, getting so much demand to scale. Like we've never gone to any city where we don't sell an event immediately. Miami, I'm not from Miami. I'm not from the States. We packed a house on literally, it was a giant monsoon.
I remember. I wasn't there, but I remember seeing your guys' stories.
A monsoon. Like you can't make this stuff up. I'd been there for 4 or 5 months. Beautiful sunshine every single day. And the one day of my event, that it's the whole reason I'm down there, is pouring rain. It's bucketing rain. People are like, a 20-minute Uber was taking hour and a half, 2 hours. People were sending me videos of their car being half submerged in water. Even with all of that, so many people took the time and got there that we were absolutely packed. Had it been clear weather, we wouldn't have been able to host everyone. But even better than that, the only 3 hours of the entire day that was dry was the moment the presenters got on stage to the time we finished the event.
Wow.
It started pouring immediately after. I started feeling trickles of rain, and I was just like...
And this was a partially outdoor event?
Yeah, it was totally outdoor.
Outdoors.
It was totally
that's
outdoor.
crazy, man.
We had
that's
an indoor
crazy.
section that was small, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be brutal. But it was
Wow.
outside, right on the Miami boardwalk, right on the water there with yachts and stuff in the background. It was like perfect until it rained. It was a sick...
But you got the window, whatever you believe in, the universe,
I don't know,
God,
voodoo
something
or
was smiling on you that day.
Something, voodoo magic. Or something.
But talk a bit about expanding to new cities. You started in Vancouver, then I believe it was Toronto, Miami, and tell us, how many cities have you done Deal Night in now?
We've done three cities. We've done like 8 events, 3 cities.
8 events, 3 cities.
But man, I'm getting messages and emails and calls from people like all over the world asking for us to come to their city. So we're definitely in the fall adding Beverly Hills. That's 100%. Very, very likely going to add New York. I'm getting so many calls from people saying, please come to our city.
Wow.
London and Dubai. Those are the 2 kind of mystery markets. I'd say Dubai, very likely. London, medium likely. I've got a lot of work to do in London to figure out the lay of the land. But I mean, we can scale as fast as we can move. If there's a city that we can have time and energy to move into, like there's demand for it there. Like it's crazy. And we built such a brand around it that we're just on a scaling rampage. And I'm loving every minute of it.
Yeah, that's phenomenal, man, where you're being literally pulled by the market demand in this case. And when people, let's say from New York or Beverly Hills, reach out to you, are these investors? Are these people that are owners of companies that want to get their name out there? Like who's driving the demand for it? What side? Is it the side of the people presenting or the side of the audience that wants this in their city, or both?
Both.
Okay.
Like for example, New York was specifically from the investor side. This specific gentleman who manages a ton of money for all these different family offices, saying like, please come to the city. Like you can even tag on to my event. We'll have another day dedicated to you and your early stage venture deals. In Beverly Hills, it's came from like the sponsor side, who's one of our sponsors is based there, saying, hey, we'd love for you to come to the city. Let me help you kick it off there. Other cities have been from the investor side. So it's all over the map. Very social media driven. People will be like, hey, I saw a YouTube short video of you doing this event, and some guy in Dubai called me saying, I want you to come to the city. I'll get you set up. So it's just, you never know where these come from. That's why we just try to be everywhere, right? Yeah,
that's phenomenal. So you mentioned a sponsor. Now, how does sponsorship work for Deal Night? Do you have the people pitching their company, and do you also have other sponsors, like sponsoring other elements of the night? Is that how it works? Yeah. Okay.
So the nights are crazy expensive.
I bet.
We put a ton of money into these. So historically, we'll try to break even. Now we're trying to monetize it because you can't run a break even business forever. That's not something that's sustainable that you want to do. But operation number 1 was to prove the concept, make people know that we exist, have like good positive association with our brand, and just really knock it out of the park. Make sure there's value for everyone there. Obviously, we want to make money at that now. So at the last 3 events, we started charging for tickets a nominal amount. The amount of money we ask people to pay for a ticket is a fraction of what we spend on them. It's just we want you to have some skin in the game, take it seriously, know you're going to actually show up. People that go there, if you're there for a free drinks, it's like you're probably not the person I want at the event. So if you got to put a little bit in. But that's not how we make money. It's companies will pay to be on stage. It's like a marketing expense, and it's part of like a larger program. Like we do a lot of like a full investor relations campaign.
Got it.
The live event is one aspect of that. But we're looking at all kinds of different business models, finding ways to find that win-win.
Got it. So I mean, it sounds like you built this ecosystem where you have Deal Night, Edge Investment, and Apollo Relations, and they all sync together, which... That makes sense. I mean, you're winning on 3 fronts. So like those 3 circles again, the trifecta. Yeah,
totally, right? But different teams, different management.
Yeah.
But they all fit together perfectly and complement each other. Yeah. So like when I sell to a client, I'll put them in all 3. So give them like A to Z, full service. That's what people are really compelled by. Yeah.
I mean, you think about some of the biggest companies we know, like multi-billion-dollar companies, like take Facebook. Oftentimes those companies start not making any money or breaking even, and then they really monetize them after they have this huge base. Exactly. And it feels like there's that element of that happening with Deal Night, where it's just you're growing this massive base, and all of a sudden it could become like massively cash flow profitable. And maybe it's in the near future. Maybe it's already now.
Hope so. Sure hope so. But yeah, exactly like how Facebook didn't put ads at the beginning, right? Yeah. They sacrificed monetization to build an audience that was like dedicated and highly engaged and growing. So we did the same thing. It's been 8 events, 5 years, and we've invested so heavily into these events, into marketing, public relations, just to make sure that we build a bit of a competitive moat so that when people think of these events, they think of our specific, brand of Deal Night events. They think of me on stage. They think of the companies they've seen, the concept. So it would be very hard for somebody to fully replicate what we're doing at this stage of the game. So now it's a little safer for us to start to focus on actually being profitable. Yeah.
Got it. Now let's talk about this idea of democratizing investing and how Deal Night is supporting that, and what forward path you see that happening, where investing is something that kind of everyday person can do more often, have more access to it, and how's Deal Night working into that?
Well, I mean, ultimately, like when I look back at my investments and the ones I made the most money on, it typically hasn't been your giant blue chip, Apple or whatever. Actually, terrible example, because I actually did really well on Apple, because Apple's just an absolute beast. But your typical large cap stock, it's a great way to preserve wealth and grow it slowly in a relatively low risk way. It's not a good way to make wealth or create it in the first place, right? You have to take higher risk, whether it's risking on yourself and starting a business and invest your money into growing your own business, or it's taking a higher risk of investing in a promising startup that's very high on the risk spectrum. That's how you create wealth. If you really want to make something exponential, you look at the richest people in the world, they're entrepreneurs, or they're typically like hedge fund managers who are notorious for taking some of the biggest investment risks. So on the one hand, there's this way to make money that we do have to acknowledge is very high risk and not for everybody. If somebody has a gambling addiction, they can get just as addicted to gambling on penny stocks. Like it can be gambling if that's how you treat it. So it's finding this balance of democratizing it to the extent that everybody should have the ability to pay. I've got, $20,000 in my bank, and this is not investment advice. I have $20,000 in my bank and I want to put $5,000 in something more exciting than a blue chip index fund. And okay, they want to put it in to an early stage round of a financing deal. I want them to have that possibility while still putting in safeguards so that they can't do anything stupid and go all in. All in is the worst thing I ever hear. I don't ever want to hear anyone say all in on anything. I don't care what it is, but it's finding that balance of giving people the deal flow, giving them the education, but making sure there's these restrictions, which the government mandates, not me, to make sure that they don't do anything truly stupid.
Got it. Well, no, that absolutely makes sense. And it's funny, this might be a crass analogy, but I imagine people that bet on their favorite sports team, and it's not just about the money, it's because they have this emotional connection to that sports team.
Big time.
And I think about Deal Night, it's able to build a little bit of an emotional connection between the audience and the presenter, because they're seeing the person there in the flesh. It's the events are big, but they're not so big that someone can't go up and shake their hands, I would imagine, after. Exactly. So how do you think that affects people's investment decisions when it's not just a company, a ticker symbol on their bank, trading index, but they've actually shooken the hand of the person representing it?
It's a huge difference because, and I think it's a really critical difference too, because, okay, just like you said, the events are big, but they're not so big that it's like a conference. So we'll get about 500 people that'll register for an event. We'll let 150 to 200 people in. So we try to let as many people as we can in without it getting too crazy. Like it used to just be too out of control. So 150, 200 people, you can literally grab a cocktail and go shake the hand of a CEO who would never in a million years meet you otherwise, but they're there with the intention of meeting as many people as they can. So bringing you closer to them is very important. And I think that's key because there's so many quantitative data points you can look at a stock. Or like a private company. What's revenue doing? Is it growing? Is it shrinking? What are your margins like? Do you have EBITDA? Do you have any debt? What industry? Like there's all these really highly quantitative data points you can look at. But the qualitative, especially for early stage investing, is arguably as important, if not more important. And when you shake somebody's hand, look in their eye, have a casual conversation, even if you're not talking about business or the stock, you can start to pick up a lot of things. Is this person good with people? Are they charismatic and enthusiastic? Are they intelligent? Like, have they taught me something? Like, do I believe that these guys are a true subject expert in this new XYZ field? Because especially if you're dealing with early stage companies, those are some of the most important things. Is this CEO likable? Is he credible? Does the CEO, does she have some strong subject expertise so that when they pitch to another like venture capital firm or something for financing, are they going to get that money? Do I believe that they'll attract employees and talent to them? Do I believe they're smart enough to build this thing? So there's so many points that you'd be missing if you just looked at financial statements, that this whole event is trying to really bring companies and investors closer together because of that. And it's so important.
I forget the venture capital firm that published this, but I remember specifically reading that one of the big firms talks about how they value investments. And I think they had the business plan and the idea weighted at X, and then the team and the execution plan was weighted 10 to 100 times more than the actual idea, which is what you're playing at, right?
I know what you're talking about. I forget what the model is, but yeah, exactly.
And it makes sense because ideas are so easy to come up with. And in early stages, the financial statements don't really mean much because you could be pre-revenue.
Yeah.
But the question of, is the person in the captain's seat of that business, is that a person you believe in? Is that a person you think is going to take it
100%.
all the way, is one of the most important things. And
100%.
Previously, it's really only been very wealthy investors that would have the privilege of being able to make those decisions. But now I can buy a ticket for deal night and be a part of that process.
You nailed it, man. Like when I was working at in institutional finance, BC Investment Management Corporation, we would be, every day we'd go to the boardroom, we'd have companies, management teams flying in, taking the time just with us, 3 or 4 people, they'd fly across the country to meet with us. And we'd have these amazing conversations where you get that intimate knowledge of all these, like I said, qualitative points. Is a retail investor going to walk in, grab a cup of coffee and come and sit down with us? No, absolutely not, right? There is no forum for them to do that. Now you can watch it on a video, which is good, and that helps certainly. But at the end of the day, there's nothing that substitutes for shaking someone's hand and looking them in the eyes at the end of the day, in my opinion anyways.
I fully agree. So let's talk a bit about, what do you see the future of investing looking like, broad terms?
Tough call. I mean, it's going to get more democratized. There's this massive fight against the 1% that hasn't slowed down, Nobody wants the rich people to have an unfair advantage. I think this is one aspect of that. Access to management, access to deal flow. It should not be only for people who are already successful or, quote unquote, in the know. It needs to be available to everyone. So I think things like equity crowdfunding are going to become more and more and more common. Just like you can invest in a Kickstarter campaign, you'll be getting hit by ads, and you already are getting hit by ads for crowdfunding campaigns. You'll be seeing more small companies looking at this as a way of raising capital from the little guy versus the big guy. And there's a lot of reasons why you would do that. But I think that's one big thing that I think is going to change. I think the ways in which you invest are going to get easier and easier. Like you see Robinhood and all these other Schwab, dropping fees to zero. There's pros and cons in that. And I could go on about that. But I think the barrier to entry of pure cost is going to come down. I think certain deal flow being guarded by brokers that won't open an account for you unless you're already, accredited or wealthy. I think those barriers to entry are going to come down. Yeah, I'd be curious what else the future holds. I mean, it's changing, and it's changing fast for the better in most ways anyways.
I mean, even, we're in 2023 now. Over the past couple of years, we had COVID, we had lockdown, we had a lot of stimulus money being sent out to people. And we know that people were bored and they started investing because they had a little bit of extra money and they had the time to think about it and do it. So I think that was a bit of an inflection point where
big time. I agree.
People that previously wouldn't have thought of themselves as an investor now views themselves as an investor, which can be a blessing and a curse. It can be dangerous because you also have potentially uneducated people in finance and accounting and risk management now thinking of themselves as an investor. You're hedging that risk and you're pulling the curtain back. So it's now not only wealthy accredited investors that have the opportunity to do that.
Like you said, it's a double-edged sword. I mean, if everyone can invest, then that means dumb people can invest. And dumb people are making dumb decisions, going all in on something they have researched for 45 minutes or that their friend told them. I got some hot tip. So, I mean, there's pros and cons to it, right? As soon as you put power in the hands of people, what they do with it, they could squander it or they can make a huge mistake. But I mean, ultimately, I do believe in a free market where, people have to make mistakes. And I know lots of people, myself included, who've made bets or gambles on risky stocks and lost a lot of money. There's no better education than losing money. The biggest nightmare, biggest curse that you can ever have as an investor is your first trade being a good one. You need your first trade to smoke you because then that's a lesson you will never forget. You need to be humbled fast. And then that is well worth the loss as an educational cost.
No, that's a fascinating concept. This idea of having losses, making mistakes early because the downside is much lower than if you make them later in your career. And the lessons are going to be expensive relative to your wealth at the time, but they'll still be not nearly as expensive if you had made that same mistake 10 years later.
Yeah. And actually, okay, I want to ask you a question.
Yeah.
So if you get to the point where you can decide between investing in yourself, so scaling like North Digital, for example, versus investing in something like a retirement portfolio. You want to have a balance because you're thinking, okay, well, if I go all in on myself, I've got no safety net. If I blow it, I'm toast. So you want to have some kind of like long-term investments. I'm curious, how do you play that? Like, what does your investment kind of philosophy like that look like?
Yeah, good question. I mean, my current investment strategy is I have way too much money in cash, which I mean is a first world problem.
Yeah,
but
yeah, poor guy.
It's no, I've up until now reinvested in North Digital and put cash in the bank and done some stocks here and there. I'm considering real estate as well, but my personal strategy, I think, comes down to most businesses will have a ceiling in terms of how much you can invest in them when it's your own business. Like there's only so much money I can reinvest in North Digital.
For a service business.
For a service business, absolutely. So maybe, as a service business, we're very cash flow positive, but also slower to scale. Like I can't just dump $500,000 into something and see an uptick right away. Like it's just how fast you can get clients, you have to hire people and this and that. So I think that as an entrepreneur, it makes sense to invest in your own company first up until the point where you start hitting diminishing returns.
Yeah.
And then you take that surplus of money. And what I like, and I've heard about the barbell strategy where you kind of take 50%, put it in safe investments and take another 50% and put it in high risk, high reward investments, which satisfies your desire for fun and excitement and being able to nail some bets and see 2x, 3x returns while you're also hedging it with safe investments.
Yeah, no, I'd say the same thing, right? Service business being the key thing, right? One of the biggest expenses you can take on is overhead, people, right? Or maybe like ads or something like that. But yeah, you're right. There's a diminishing returns.
Yeah.
So I'd say the same thing.
And even people they're not a true fixed expense because if it doesn't work out, you give them their proper notice and you let them go. But when you start investing in things like inventory or what else, even just like upgrading physical machinery and real estate and things like that for much more brick and mortar businesses or e-commerce businesses, it's much harder to recoup those costs because if you buy inventory and it doesn't sell, there's no way to get it back.
Yeah, totally. No.
But no, I was talking to a friend the other night and it's step one is to earn money and create wealth. And step two is how do you manage it and grow it? And that step two is not as easy as most people think it is to do that intelligently.
Right. It's funny. I just had this flashback of when one of my first co-op jobs at National Bank Financial, I worked for a classic stockbroker.
Yeah.
Classic. And one day, one of these brokers pulled me into his office and he's like, this blue chip stuff, it's not how you get rich. Like this is how you get rich. And he showed me these things. It was the first time I ever saw a penny stock. And I was like, what is this shit? And it's like, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 cents a share. It was like Raging River Exploration, this like oil and gas company. And he's like, this is how you make money. You bet on a management team that's got this good asset, good track record, blah, blah, blah. And I kind of just laughed it off. Years later, when I was in institutional finance, it turns out that company had nailed it.
Wow.
And it was the first time I saw him. Like, oh shit. Okay. Like there is something to that. It just caught my attention of like just penny stocks and high risk investing and the difference between conserving wealth and creating wealth and having the eye to differentiate between what's what.
And balancing both of those.
Yeah, I'm terrible at balancing it. I'm awful. Every year I get more and more high risk, but it's just like, I guess when it comes down to it, if I lost absolutely everything, and over the last couple of years, like my investments, some of them I've lost a lot. Like if I had companies go bankrupt, I don't care. I mean, I care, but in the sense that I'm fully confident in my ability to make it back. I've been broke before multiple times. I know what I'm worth. I know what I'm good at. I know that if I lose everything, I can make it back. And I have such a long time horizon. I don't have kids. I don't have like mortgage payments. You know what I mean? Like nobody depends on me. Like if I need to camp out in a tent in Stanley Park while trading on the Starbucks Wi-Fi, I can do that. So I think my risk tolerance has gotten more and more and more. So I'm now like, I even just liquidated almost my entire large cap portfolio, and I'm putting it in, investing in the businesses, like, investing in Edge, for example, is one thing. We're looking at buying other websites, things like that. But also my personal brand, hired two smart young guys to manage my personal brand, trying to do more things to grow that side of my life. And yeah, every year I just get more high risk, and I'm sure there's one day that'll change when I'm looking at a family or something. But for now, yeah, full tilt, baby.
Well, we're still young and free. It's
right.
In terms of entrepreneurs, if we were pro athletes, we'd be nearing the end of our relevancy. But as entrepreneurs, we're just at the beginning. We're just on our warm up, right?
Just getting right.
Just getting warmed up. Let's sort of look at this overarching now. You went from institutional finance to crypto to Edge, which branched out to Apollo, then Deal Nights. Yeah. And then we have personal brand going on top of it. So throughout that journey, what would you say your like why is, and your biggest passion point through all of that? Like the through thread that keeps you going and keeps you having faith in yourself, where if I lost all my money, I know I could build it back. Because I think for you and me, it's more normal to think that way. But for a lot of people watching this content, they might be in a job they don't like. They might not have that foundation of confidence. Where do you think that comes from for you?
Good. That's a tough one. I mean, yeah, having that self-confidence is the key to knowing you're going to make it, and knowing that if you lose it, you can make it again. So where does that self-confidence come from is tough. I wonder, man. I mean, it's like, I'd say I've tried so many things, and I've failed at so many things too, that I think once you kind of start running out of things to fail at, and you start hitting your success and finding what you're good at, finding what you're known for, finding what's like unique to you, and you start to build that confidence of like, okay, well, I've tried a lot of things. I know those aren't for me. I've tried these things. I know they are for me. Turns out I'm good at these. Turns out I get good feedback on these. You get that kind of social acceptance. You get that business acceptance in the form of a paycheck. Your confidence just builds. But I think your confidence would never build if you're too scared to do the painful process of getting there. Like if you're working at your job 9 to 5, you're doing a good job. You get a little bit of validation in the paycheck, but you don't really have that confidence because you've never taken a big risk and seen it pay off. I think that's where confidence really comes from. Putting yourself out there, doing something scary, seeing that big payoff, and just feeling like a champion. You know what I mean? Like that. Think of your first time you got revenue from it selling to a client. Like you feel the lightning in your veins.
All $200 of it.
Whatever.
That was some of the most exciting $200 that I've ever earned.
It totally is, because that's yours and something that you built from nothing. Yeah. Right? It's just lightning through your veins, and that feeling, your confidence, your ego just starts exploding. And as you get more of those wins, like you don't just get this confidence and ego and then it just disappears. Like it's exponential, right? So I think it's just those moments of victory that just make you feel like tough, make you feel smart, make you feel confident. And then it snowballs. I think that's what it is.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned two things, and I see both of them having the same starting point, this act of courage of taking the risk, doing the thing. And then if it doesn't work out and you recover, that builds confidence. And then when it does work out and you win, that also builds a lot of confidence. Yeah. So the win-win. The commonality is taking that act of courage and taking the action at first. And I think that's what I've learned too, is that often confidence follows action, not the other way around. Yep. People, I find, say, oh, I want to feel confident and courageous before I do the hard thing. Sure. But actually, you build that confidence after you do the hard thing.
I'm a big fan of, jump out of a plane and what do they say? Build your parachute on the way down.
Yeah, that's entrepreneurship, right?
Well, that's what it is, right? And I think nothing drives me more crazy than talkers. I hate talkers. I hate it so much. Everybody wants to start a business. Everybody wants to go on this trip. Everybody wants to jump out of a plane. Everybody wants to do all these things. And I'm going to, coulda, shoulda, woulda, waiting for this, waiting for that. It's like, have dreams, have your inspiration, have your like wacky ideas and talk to me about it. I'm fine with that. But there's an extent where it's like at a certain point, like just stop talking to me. Like if you're not going to do it, like I need to see you do it. And then that's when I'll respect you. Win or lose, fail or succeed. Seeing that action is when I'll have massive respect for somebody just going for it. And just like you said, it's like, oh, I should get X, I should get confidence and then I'll do it. But no, it's just take massive action now. Win or lose, you're still going to win in the long run in some way or another. Action you know what I mean, is the key, is the first step.
I think you touched on something really important there, which is in life, we're often surrounded by people that don't take action. Right. They're more spectators than in the arena. And I found, especially as I was leaving my corporate job, starting my business, and even the first couple of years, that was more of a conflict in my life where not all of my coworkers and friends really supported what I was doing or even understood it. And now I'm fortunate to say the vast majority of my social network are people that are very supportive and are also doing similar things.
Everybody loves you when you're a success.
Well, there's that too, but I think over time, my social circle has evolved to be more so people who are on the same page.
Yeah, same.
When you left your corporate job, did anyone give you resistance? Friends, family, coworkers, or did you feel supported throughout that?
Absolute, yes. There was both. I mean, tons of resistance. Like all credit to my family always being mega supportive. Like I said, my dad is a true entrepreneur, massively supportive all the time. Friends as well. Most friends as well, not all friends. People from my career thought I was a maniac.
Yeah, me too.
What are you doing? Like, you literally had the golden ticket to making millions of dollars. Not exaggerating, like millions of dollars at this job, and you threw it away, quote unquote. So not much support there. Some of them, yes. Some of them reached out and were like, good for you, unplugging from the matrix. But yeah, man, my social circle has shifted a lot too. Man, I have these memories actually that you were part of this. I remember sometimes people will even make fun of you for being an entrepreneur, and kind of like, being an entrepreneur at times can suck so bad. And you have to just pump yourself up, hype yourself up when nobody else is going to do it. But you need to kind of get in that mindset of like, rah, rah, rah. And I remember you posted this thing on your story looking down our little corridor of Richards or whatever it was, of, oh, my entrepreneur buddies are here.
I remember that story, man. I remember that.
Was it somebody accidentally replied to your story, or somebody who shared it chirping us, basically being like, oh, these like losers, like, you know what I mean? Like,
I don't remember the chirp as much, but I know the exact story. You remember the chirp? Okay.
I remember the chirp.
Okay.
Right. And then it's just funny. You try to pump yourself up, build that community.
Yeah.
And there's people that just will never be on that level, never can think of it. And what's easier for them to do? Rise to you or try to pull you down to them. Right. And those little chirps, I remember this like 6 years later, that chip is still on my shoulder. And I still have tons of chips on my shoulder, but it's like, you got to let those things motivate you. But it's your community. That's why people that are on the same page are so important. And that's why our social circles have shifted to that, because you need that support, man. Entrepreneurs, it's hard out there.
Yeah, it is. It can be really hard. And I think it's becoming more normalized. Like I almost, there's like two sides of the coin. There's the people that don't understand entrepreneurship, don't know why we do what we do. But also entrepreneurship is so trendy now. There's so many entrepreneur influencers, and everyone wants to be a YouTuber and have a side hustle and do this. So it's interesting. There's both are kind of happening at once. And I think that's shifted over the 5 years that
I think so too.
We've been entrepreneurs, right?
Massively.
But what I do remember is that before I started a business, I really thought that there was something special about business owners. They were in like a league of their own, that it was like this wall where it was like all the regular people with jobs and then people that own business and did their own thing. And as I become an entrepreneur, I realized that's not the case. They're they're not really much smarter than anyone else. They're just people who decided to do their own thing.
Yeah.
And
totally.
My first business partner, when we were working together, we had a running inside joke around how no one knows what they're doing. And what we found is that dealing with, other accountants and lawyers and suppliers or vendors, that even these people running big businesses would make mistakes. Like they'd mess up in an email, and they'd like mess up with our account and do something that didn't make any sense. And we're like, well, like all of these entrepreneurs are kind of just like stumbling around, trying to figure out the next best thing. Totally. There's no master plan. Totally. They're not fundamentally different than we are.
Business held together by duct tape.
Yeah. And like, I enjoyed my business school experience, and I was, UVic was an entrepreneurial school. But this also, I find this idea of having to have this polished business plan, this 10-year trajectory, it doesn't really happen in reality. You just, like you said, you're building it as you're jumping out of a plane. You're building your parachute on the way down.
How many times have you pivoted while you're running your business? You have your perfect 10-year plan that you throw away after 4 days.
Yeah.
Right?
The world shifts so fast right now. It's chaos theory, right? You can't predict it that far in the future.
AI just disrupting absolutely everything, right? My whole agency leverages AI in such a massive way that has allowed us to shrink our headcount by half and have the same output, if not more. I wouldn't have ever thought of that a few years ago. I didn't know AI was so powerful.
Before ChatGPT, it wasn't even on my radar, really.
No, right? It's crazy. It's just blowing up.
In a moment, they had, I think it was a week to 1 million users.
It's insane.
Which was like something like 10, 100 times faster than Facebook grew is wild.
Out of control.
Yeah.
So things change. You got to change fast. That's what makes a good entrepreneur good, is that they're nimble, so quick moving to capitalize on new initiatives, but to dump old initiatives that aren't working.
Yeah. That's the Charles Darwin quote, who I share a birthday with, February 12th.
Do you?
He said that it's not the strongest that survive, but the most adaptable to change.
Darwin.
There he is. Like smart guy. However many 100 years ago he was writing his book.
Darwin. Okay, cool. I love that.
Cool. Well, what would you, some closing comments here for someone that's watched along your story, what would you kind of, I don't know, say to someone who's working the 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. institutional finance job, looks at you on stage at deal night, thinks of you as light years ahead of them, but how do you, what's that first step for someone starting out?
Well, first thing I'd say is it's much less glamorous than it looks. It's much harder than it looks. I'm not posting my failures on social media, which arguably maybe I should. Sometimes I do feel a little fake doing things like that, because obviously behind the scenes, it's a lot harder than it looks. So I'd say entrepreneurship is not for everyone, and there's no shame in that not being for you. It's not for most people, right? A lot of people like the stability, and there's absolutely no shame in that. Like you can rise to the top of a corporation. You can be an intrapreneur. So first thing, understanding if entrepreneurship is even for you or not. Second thing being, it's not as glamorous as it looks at all. Everything on social media is shiny and polished. It's not like that behind the scenes. The third thing is being, if you do want to take the leap, unfortunately, you're probably going to have to leap and then figure it out fast before you go bankrupt. And you got to treat coming up with your idea like a full-time job. And you got to take it seriously, and you got to be willing to commit to coming up with 1,000 awful ideas to get a few good ones. And then as you go, you can't be too stuck in what you do, because the business that you start with is probably not the business you're running in a year, probably not the business you're running in 3 years. In one way or another, you're probably going to go through some massive fundamental shifts, and you have to be not only open to that, you have to be willing to jump on it quick. Those are probably some of the main points I'd say for somebody looking to be an entrepreneur. Get used to failing too. Failing is good.
I agree. It's interesting. It's like, it is everything it's cracked up to be, and it's not at the same time. I think we absolutely live in this over glamorized social media era where the highlight reel is shown, and oftentimes the struggle isn't shown.
100%.
And I think I'll take credit for coining a term which I call eBay, EBAE, which I say is earning before all expenses, which is what a lot of entrepreneurs talk about.
Yeah.
And revenue numbers get thrown around. Hey, I made $3 million, and it turned out
me $4 million.
Right? Yeah. And it's that's the other thing too, is that people will put their best foot forward, and revenue is not profit. And then you got to do it intelligently.
eBay, that's hilarious.
eBay, yeah. We'll let that catch on. Just credit me for it.
I will credit you for it.
It's also Bay, like the yeah. So
dude,
that's good. It's got to catch on. Gurus love talking about eBay.
eBay.
Yeah. Buy my course, $2 million I made.
He's got a full course on eBay. It's only going to be yours for $49.95, billed bi-weekly, US dollars.
All right. Well, thank you, Kevin. This has been awesome to have you here. Our first episode, first podcast. We got lots of gold nuggets and takeaways, and loved hearing about your journey, just how it meandered from selling sandwiches to going through a crypto boom and bust into where you are now, launching deal nights across North America. So inspiring to see your journey, inspiring to see how we both evolve, and just excited we got to spend that first year of it together in a lot of ways, gallivanting around Asia, being high on life, and earning our first dollars to where we are now. So thank you.
Fun. Lots of lessons. And it's been fun to grow with you and do this together, man. So thanks for having me on your inaugural podcast episode. I'd love to do more of this. This was a ton of fun and brought back a lot of good memories.
Amazing.
So thanks, man.
All right. Thank you, Kevin.